our numbers are there are roughly 5,600 people on the street. There's $500 million going to that. You break that down, that's $80, $90, $100,000 a person. I think the public should demand that all the organizations the public is funding are subject to an outside review as to whether they're using the money efficiently, effectively, and their success rate. If there's some organizations that are not as successful and efficient, they should get less money, and those organizations that are more efficient and effective should get more money.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick Howard Burnett, and this is Hot House. Our mission is to identify and promote the individuals, ideas, and institutions that empower communities and provide solutions to our most pressing challenges. Our guest today is Jordan Schnitzer. Entrepreneur and philanthropist Jordan Schnitzer is a well-known figure for his ongoing efforts to improve and sustain the quality of life in his hometown of Portland, Oregon. Mr. Schnitzer heads the Jordan Schnitzer Family Foundation, which boasts the country's largest private print collection with over 20,000 works of art that the foundation lends out to museums across the country for others to enjoy. The foundation also supports artistic education and scholarship through its many grants and publications. Most recently, however, Jordan Schnitzer has received praise in Oregon and nationally as the prime mover in the development of the groundbreaking Bybee Lakes Hope Center. Bybee Lakes Hope Center is a nonprofit shelter in North Portland, the largest in the state, that currently operates 175 beds but has a capacity for over 300 residents. With its mission to help solve the dual tragedies of homelessness and drug addiction, Bybee Lakes is a state-of-the-art facility in a beautiful natural setting that has become the model for other communities. Unlike most other facilities, it requires long-term residents to seek treatment for their drug addiction. The center is completely funded by private donations, but is now seeking support from Multnomah County to continue its important work. So let's find out all about it. Jordan Schnitzer, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's get right into it. Tell us how you first got involved with the Bybee Lakes Hope Center project.
Well, for several decades, the family's been very involved philanthropically with the arts, culture, and also social services too. So it was not out of the ordinary for us to help try to attack and come up with a solution for the homeless issue, which unfortunately the last 10 years across this country has exponentially increased due to lots of demographic reasons, people getting older, economic reasons. The last recession hit people very hard. So as people may know, the county 25 years ago had a levy to build a low incarceration prison. And as one would expect, every neighborhood in the city complained and moaned they didn't want it there. So the county went to the Port of Portland, which has a 2,000-acre industrial park, and got a conditional use to locate it there. So they built it, but then they never quite planned in the bond measure for enough money to fund it. And understandably, there was a legislative tax change that also limited the amount of funding for a facility like that. So it sat vacant for 20 years. And all of the conservative political pundits on the radio shows kept bitching and talking about the incompetence of our county leaders that built a facility with taxpayer money that was sitting unused when we had, over the years, increasing crime and need for low incarceration beds. The county finally put it up for sale about 4 years ago, and someone else tied it up. They couldn't quite perform, and we looked at it. Our principal business at my real estate company, Schnitzer Properties, is industrial warehouses. And it was a prime piece of property in the Port of Portland's industrial park that serves the community here and the state of Washington across the river. So we looked at it and figured out it was worth about $5-6 million for the land to build a warehouse. When the first buyer couldn't perform, we stepped in and bought it for roughly $6 million. But every time I went out there while we were getting our plans and specifications for a warehouse done, I'd walk through the facility. It broke my heart that when we had an increasingly homeless problem, that there were 9 wings, huge kitchen, medical facilities, classrooms. The facility could handle 500 beds. There was room to build another couple of hundred units behind it. So I reached out to a number of the nonprofits that we support, such as Volunteers of America, which has a $23 million budget. Kay Turan, one of the best executives in the state. They do a fabulous job with alcohol, drug rehab, juvenile delinquents, seniors, you name it. And it was interesting. Her organization came up with a 10-page, very thoroughly costed out program. And the county, for whatever reasons that seemed to hate this project, said, even though we give you the majority of your money, we won't talk to you about the Wapato, now called Bybee Lakes facility. I thought that was so odd. We had a proven performer in the community for 40 years, dealt with lots of folks that needed a helping hand. I went to 18 organizations. Finally, a group from the coast, Helping Hands, got excited and said they could do it. Now, I wanted to make sure, because they'd been successful with several facilities on the Oregon coast, that this wasn't too big a jump for them. And they raised $3 million initially. We helped with some of that. They created an advisory board in Portland. And I was very impressed with the program they had then, which they've implemented since at Bybee Lakes, that's data-driven. If you ever hear a presentation from them, it's very smart stuff. I'm sure there are other providers that do things like this too. So I remember talking to Alan Evans, who founded the Helping Hands, and I said, the county executive and others have said that the Wapato facility, now called Bybee Lakes, should never be used for homeless. And when they were asked why, they said, well, it's not near the public library. There's no internet and no bus service. When I met Mr. Evans and I said, tell me your story, he said, I was on the street for 27 years, abused as a kid. I then naively asked, in hindsight, pretty stupid, I said, have you ever been arrested? He said, you kidding? 27 times. You get tired of being out on the street. It's nice to get into a jail where you get a meal and a bed for a couple of nights. I said, you ever been to prison? He said, of course, twice. He said, how do you think I supported myself? I know how to break into any house, forge checks, you name it, like anyone else on the street. I said, so would Bybee Lakes work for you? Because the county said it's not near the library, no internet, no bus service. He says, Jordan, look, when you're on the street, okay, you don't have a library card. You don't have any identification. You can't get a bus permit. When I was under the Burnside Bridge in December and it's raining, all I wanted was a tarp to stay dry. So quickly going forward, they entered into a lease with me. I get $1 a year. I got almost $7 million invested in it. Not one of my better real estate deals, but maybe one of my best human services deal. They have 80+% success rate. What's interesting about this program is people have to come voluntarily. And once they're there, I called my friend Tim Boyle at Columbia Sportswear. They have a big warehouse 2 blocks away. Half the people are working in the fulfillment center, getting $18 an hour. Once they start working, they pay $250 a month towards their room and board. And when I've gone out there, as anyone would, I was get emotional, but I was impressed because of what the residents would tell me. Many in the community around, in this community and others, think that people want to be on the street. And I said to them, do you want to be on the street? No. I said, well, you got to let people know then. There's a lot of people out here that think all of you want to be on the street. You don't want to help get your lives back. So, well, what I made clear when I talk to folks, and I'm not an expert in this field, but I think there's lots of common sense. The Bybee Lakes Hope Center is one solution. There's no intent that it is the only solution. Everyone on the street, they're not just nobodies. They're somebody's mother, father, son, daughter, grandson, nephew, neighbor. Each one, like all of us, has their own story. And I think those of us that have lived a few more decades realize that at any time in anyone's life, there can be tsunami-like events that come over us. Unless we're lucky enough to have family around us, have some money, have a house, any of us could find ourselves in a condition that we never imagined we'd be in. That's why, from a moral standpoint, I think it's important for all of us not to ignore these people, because they could be us.
Is the Bybee Lakes approach different from other shelters? You mentioned data-driven and responsibility and paying rent for their lodging. Are there other ways that it's different?
I think one way is I've heard lots of people talk who are gerontologists, specialists, and whatever. And so many of them have wonderful degrees from Portland State, Yale, Harvard, San Jose State, doesn't matter. The folks they have out of Bybee Lakes, they're all people who've been on the street. And it's a lot different if you or I, no matter how empathetic, sympathetic, wise we might think we are, we're talking to someone that's on the street. It's a lot different when there's someone who's been on the street. They say, don't pull that bullshit on me. I was there. I was you. I think that's an important factor. Second, they evolved their own, when I say data-driven, I've seen the presentations, I've seen the way they work up. They quantify lots of data to create a unique profile on each individual. So what may work for Rick may not work for Rob. But in the end, their success rate is substantially above many other providers. So I guess you'd say here the proof's in the pudding. And very impressed. Also, cost-wise, the county and the city have passed taxes. There's roughly in our community $500 million a year going towards homeless services. And I think most of us taxpayers would say we have well-intended, what appear to be honest public servants, but certainly most of us are disappointed at the pace of decision-making about how to address these issues. You know, I operate my business in 6 states, my real estate business. And I think I'm pretty good at some things in the real estate business. I've been working since I was 14. But I think the badge of honor, the wisdom we get, is while we may get to have some sophistication and expertise in one area, it's wonderful to reach out and say to someone, you have expertise in this area. I want to learn from you. Help me. What can you teach me? There are wonderful models up and down the West Coast, different kinds of programs that are time-tested and best practices. Why it's been so hard for this metropolitan area to take some of those best practices and adapt them for our community is confusing to most of us residents.
What do you say to people who insist on the housing first strategy or support the so-called low barrier shelter model?
What I say is that may sound good in theory, and I'm not trying to put myself out as an expert. I think I am an expert at listening to others who are experts. And when I met the people at Bybee Lakes, and I see other people on the street in front of our office and whatever, 70% of these folks have drug and alcohol problems. There's a certain percentage, our figures show 10 to 15%, that can never be rehabilitated. And society has to address those folks and to say, we've got to fund them in a nice facility for the rest of their lives. But for the others, however they got there, whether there was a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, whether it was experimenting with some drugs and getting hooked, whether it was a combination of losing a job, losing a spouse, losing a home, however they got on the street, merely taking someone from a tent and putting them in an apartment doesn't solve the underlying issues as to how they got on the street. Second of all, from a pure cost benefit standpoint, new apartments in Portland, Oregon cost roughly $325,000 to almost $400,000 a unit. So in terms of those precious dollars, you've got a facility, Bybee Lakes, that's costing roughly $50 a day per resident. That's their numbers. Someone can go audit them. They can have capacity for 500 beds. And what Bybee Lakes, what the Helping Hands organization is asking for is roughly $3 to $5 million a year. Whereas that would, if you're talking about housing first, produce 10 or 12 apartment units. And here you can take care of 300 people a night. So, I've spent $7 million buying the thing. Again, I'm getting $1 a year. I've said if they want to cut the rent to 50 cents, I'm all for it. Okay. But I think what's also happened is these additional taxes were imposed on people. There's been a greater reluctance of the private sector to donate to Helping Hands because people are saying, aren't I being taxed enough for homeless services?
Including the new homelessness tax.
Yes. So they found it tougher than they imagined to operate privately. And it's understandable with how much money people are being taxed in Multnomah County. We're paying 14.4% tax, the highest tax of any place in the country except for Manhattan. And in Manhattan, to be taxed at 14.4%, you have to make 25 million or more, which I don't think too many residents in Multnomah County are quite at that level.
So, Mr. Schnitzer, what do you think Portland leaders need to do right now to improve this situation and the overall quality of life here in the city? There's a mayor election coming up. So what advice would you give the current leadership and also any successful candidate for mayor?
Okay, so the first question is, if you ask me if I was czar, what I would do in the first 90 days, first I'd work with the legal system and I'd bring in Multnomah County judges, I'd bring in a number of attorneys, I'd bring in other politicians, say, we need a drug court. The 110 measure, I think, was well intended because we saw a lot of people being incarcerated when they needed drug and alcohol rehab programs. So many of us voted for 110, but then I think the political system broke down, not providing the infrastructure to take care of people that we've now decriminalized. Now I think we need to go back and we need a drug court. We need to take people on the street and say, Mr., Ms., you have two choices. You either go to jail or you get rehab. Now, if someone can't be rehabilitated, then as I said, we've got to figure out a facility where we take care of them. First thing is get a drug court. Second of all, we need an intermediate care facility. Tucson does a great job. Steal their idea. What happens now, and maybe your audience doesn't quite understand, maybe one of them has seen a crazed person on the street screaming with their shirt off and scaring people and whatever. So you call 911. 911 sends a policeman. They call an ambulance. The ambulance takes the person to St. Vincent's, OHSU, Good Sam, Tuolumne. Federally, the hospitals cannot deny emergency room coverage to anybody. So it's Friday night. And God forbid you have a heart attack and you're a Good Sam. They're taking you first. The policeman has to wait with the client, the drug or alcohol addict on the street, till they get admitted into Good Sam. They may sit there for 3 or 4 hours, not on the beat, waiting there. The drug or alcohol person gets in the hospital, treated overnight. Maybe it's 2 nights. They let go the next day. They're back a week later. They have a list of the 100, 200 people that are there all the time. The $1,400 charge, AMR charges for the ambulance, you're paying for. The write-off at the hospitals, they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars, you're paying for. So Tucson created an intermediate care facility. Drunk person on the street, police can pick him up, take him right to the intermediate care facility, drop him off, and leave and go back to work. They have professionals at the intermediate care facility, far more cost effective than the hospital. They have doctors, nurses, whatever, but they have specialists in drug and alcohol rehab. So the second point is create an intermediate care facility. Maybe go to the hospitals and ask them to support part of it because they're losing their shirt with what they have to do. Okay. Third, there are 325 organizations providing homeless services in this community. Now, someone could suggest, and I don't think it's a fair suggestion, what if the homeless problem were solved? What would all those organizations and all those people do? I'm not inferring they're not well intended, but the objective of those 325 should be to eliminate the problem. But anyway, there are 325. We started an organization that started to rate them. So there should be a formal process at the county level that distributes most of the money. There should be requests for proposals every year for every organization. There should be benchmarks of what they're trying to accomplish. And there should be an independent review as to whether they're being effective or not. I assume that you, others in your audience, have remodeled a kitchen before or done something where you go out and get a bid. When I asked the county executive, tell me, Central City Concern gets $100 million. Did they do a formal request? No. Do you do a review of their performance? No. Now, hopefully I'm wrong and I misheard the answer. So you're sitting there saying that there are 325 organizations. They get money from the county and private too. Are any of them rated? I mean, look at United Underwriters, with all the hair dryers and all the electric stuff, they all get approved by that UL rating, whatever. And here we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. And if I were a taxpayer, I would say, this isn't right. We're not inferring the organizations aren't honest and doing a good job.
Yeah.
But they welcome transparency and they should want to publish their results.
Well, it's a good business model that I think the government should embrace. I mean, many of the organizations, the NGOs, they have mission statements and they have anecdotal stories, success stories, sporadically, but there's no hard data.
That's right, none. Fourth, along the line of valuing the 325, I would create a number of task forces. This is my biggest gripe with our elected officials. We've gone with all the real estate organizations in town, offered our services, and so forth. Let me give you an example. We went to see Carmen Rubio. She's the commissioner now in charge of housing. Deborah Imms is the executive director of the Multifamily Council. Virtually every apartment owner in Oregon belongs to that. They have 300 landlords representing 275,000 units of apartments. Those 300 landlords operate 90% of the low-income housing projects. And I said, Carmen, the city has a wonderful goal of wanting to increase housing. The governor does too. Have you ever thought about calling the multifamily council? No. See, from my standpoint, if I were a commissioner in charge of housing, first thing I'd do is I'd ask for a meeting with the people that are producing and managing the housing and say, I got a tough problem here.
Yeah.
Where the public sure wants us to create more housing. What ideas do you have? What do you suggest? How can we work with you? I mean, it's just common sense.
Gets back to your point about listening to the experts.
So Deborah Imms wrote 2 letters to Commissioner Rubio offering the services. No response yet. Now, is it Carmen Rubio's fault? No, I'm not trying to blame her or whatever. What I'm saying is we have a number of officials at the city, the county, that the only word I can use is arrogance. That somehow they think they're supposed to have all the answers. We elected them to help find the answers, not have the answers. So my fourth point would be create a number of commissions, involve the public. Fifth point is this whole issue of transparency. Our elected officials, we pass those tax measures. They have an obligation to have a yearly report to the public, to the taxpayer, of how the funds were used, what the goals were, what percent they're getting. I mean, it's going to take some time to have these things ramp up. No one's expecting miracles.
Yeah.
So there you go. Those are my quick 5 points of what should happen.
Great points. Great points. Yeah, it seems like the constant mantra is, well, we're doing a lot, we're spending a lot of your money, and we'd do a better job if we had more of your money to spend more of it on what we're currently doing.
We put together a group called Revitalize Portland, which is all the nonprofit real estate organizations. So the Multifamily Council, the Society of Office Industrial Brokers, the IREM, all the 10 professional organizations. And we got them all together and organized them. And basically what we said is, we're here to serve you. If you think about the real estate professionals, whether you're a real estate attorney, a broker, developer, architect, title person, a property manager, the real estate people know how to get things done, whether it's housing, industrial, retail, office, student housing, senior housing. Use these people, get them involved. They want to help. Their business is making a successful community. So that's my biggest gripe is it's not a sign of incompetence. It's a sign of competence to say, gee, join with me, help me. Let's work on this together.
So in closing, what do you think the general public can do to show its support for Bybee Lake's Hope Center and similar programs? Letter writing, phone calls?
I think the general public out there wants two things, okay? If they're agreed to be taxed, they want to see those funds being used effectively. If they're not being used effectively, then they shouldn't be taxed. We did a study. We hired Portland State, some graduate students. Our numbers are there are roughly 5,600 people on the street. Maybe it's 5,900 one week, 5,400 the next. There's $500 million going to that. You break that down, that's $80, $90, $100,000 a person. Okay. So what your audience can do is this, okay, is the tax measures are already passed, is I'd say the public officials need to hear from every single taxpayer. Those public officials work for everyone in your audience. We're not working for them, and we applaud them for being public servants. We thank them, but let's not forget who the customer is. So real simply, if the public officials aren't listening to the people who voted for the taxes and voted for them, then the public's got to elect other officials that will listen to what the public wants.
Great advice. And I think Bybee Lakes is also taking donations from the general public as well.
Absolutely. It's an efficient nonprofit. And so a couple of the new county commissioners, Julia Brim-Edwards, Lynn Peterson in particular, those two have called up and said, we think that county Metro should be giving some money, but we want a copy of the lease. I said, you can publish the lease in the Oregonian. It's a triple net lease, $1 a year. It's that simple. Yeah. Second of all, if I were the county, I'd give money, but I'd do it on the condition that you bring in some outside third party accounting or some kind of firm and go through their books. And I think that those same people should go through everybody who you give money to, their books. Absolutely. Okay, I believe the numbers I've gotten from the Helping Hands are honest numbers, but I didn't go and check their books. But I think the public should demand that all the organizations the public is funding are subject to an outside review as to whether they're using the money efficiently, effectively, and their success rate. If there's some organizations that are not as successful and efficient, they should get less money. And those organizations that are more efficient and effective should get more money.
It's very simple.
The other thing I would do that I don't think has happened much is we've been fortunate as a family as we got more successful over the years. We've supported 250 nonprofits. Some a lot, some smaller amounts, but an awful lot. And we're honored to do that and never feel empowered. We feel humbled and lucky to be fortunate to give back. And oddly enough, the more we've donated of time and money, the more successful our business has been. But there was one organization called Rose Haven in Northwest Portland. I'd heard about it, but didn't know much about it. And they had knocked on our door and whatever. So about a year and a half ago, I went to visit them, and they were just moving into a new facility. And they take care, it's a day shelter for women. And I was so blown away by how efficient they are in terms of their administrative costs versus the money they help people with, the importance of a safe place for women where they can go alone with their kids, whatever, do their laundry, whatever, get a meal. So I remember talking to one of the county commissioners, and I said, I was really impressed by them. And I've lived in this town all my life. I'd heard about them, didn't know them. My gut sense is there's a need for that facility in Northeast and Southeast and Southwest. If I were at the county and had money, I would go to some of the best providers. Instead of reinventing the wheel, I'd go to Rose Haven and say, you have a fabulous board. There's never been any audit issues with you. There's never been any complaints, never been any criminal. Boy, we sure need your help in other parts of the city. Okay, we don't want to stretch your organization, but if we help fund a facility in Northeast someplace, would you be willing to develop a second facility? Go to some of the people that are doing a good job now and reinforce them. So probably have fewer providers, but providers that do best practices, are efficient with their spending, and effective with the results.
You've got so many great ideas. Have you ever thought about running for mayor yourself? I think you'd make a great mayor.
I think I have the skill sets and the speaking skills that and the knowledge because of our experience in our business. Other hand, I don't think I'd have the temperament and patience. The people that should be running for office are people that have deep experience, have helped build businesses, have had setbacks, gotten through those setbacks. I remember my high school quote for the yearbook was, "The man who makes no mistakes usually makes nothing." So many people I know that would be wonderful as city, county, state elected officials don't want to put their family through the intrusion of the privacy issues and the way that partisan politics today attacks everyone. And unfortunately, all the campaign advisors seem to show that by attacking, and being negative, that somehow gets votes. I think most of us are pretty disgusted by it. You never hear what a candidate really feels or what they really commit to. So I think running for office, which I assumed I'd do, I stayed in Oregon with the intent of doing that, isn't going to happen. There are lots of people out there better than me that would be wonderful leaders. And maybe over time, some of those patterns change. I mean, if you look back at the legislature, when I remember in high school, college, law school, there were a number of business people that would take time off, that ran businesses, that would be in the legislature because they felt lucky to be in this country and part of the system. And I think they were wonderful legislators. I'm not inferring our current legislators aren't wonderful too. I'm just saying that if you look at the profile of the people in the past and the profile now at all these different levels, they're a bit different. In life, we all get hit with problems. The key is picking yourself back up and getting going again.
Right.
Though people harp on any tiny misstep in one's life, and I think that's sad that eliminates a lot of people who should be in office. The real shame by this podcast is it shouldn't be taking place. The solutions are there. From my standpoint, the solutions are easy. Biggest issue would have been money, and we have the money.
Yeah, it seems like the political will is not there for whatever reason.
I think that's a question we all have. Usually the issue is money. When I gave you that figure, it's $500 million. You can quantify that. 240 million is coming from the new tax.
Wow.
Counting 5,000, 6,000 people on the street. Look at how much that is per person.
Yeah.
You're telling me we can't figure out with $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a person, we can't figure out how to get them either one housed forever or get them rehabilitated? My God, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It's going somewhere.
Well, good luck and thanks for the podcast.
Thank you, Jordan Schnitzer. It's been a real pleasure. And we will do our best to support Bybee Lakes through this podcast on our other activities.
And anyone wants to go out there, you can call out there and arrange a tour. And I think people would be blown away by how good it looks, how happy the people are. There's an organic garden behind it. There's a play area there. They made arrangements for the public schools. Schools come in and teach the kids. There's a wing for men, a wing for women, a wing for families. Physically, it's built like the proverbial brick house without the word. But there's a bus a block away. There's internet.
And it's a nice setting too. It's a natural setting.
The last thing about that setting is a lot of people complain about where it is. Well, in non-traffic times, it takes me 12, 14 minutes. During traffic times, it can take you 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But think if it were in Tigard, or if it were in Beaverton,
Right.
it was highway, it'd take you that long rush hour to get there too.
Anyway, right.
And one last point is, some people, again, the politicians said, well, it's too far out, whatever. When I talk to the residents, and I say, if we waved a wand and had this down on 4th Street in Portland or wherever, that'd be better. They said, absolutely not. The last thing I need is be in a facility where across the street, someone is dealing drugs, or there's a liquor store up the street. No, that's not where I need to be.
All right.
Thanks for the time.